Ma'am, I'm going to ask you one last time. Tell me why you're really here. Sheriff Wade Mercer's voice cut across the quiet breakfast crowd like a door slamming shut, and every fork seemed to stop halfway to someone's mouth. Danielle Brooks looked up from her coffee, but did not answer immediately. She sat alone in a corner booth at Miller's Diner, a modest place just off Route 27 where farmers, deputies, mechanics, and courthouse clerks had eaten breakfast for years. Morning sunlight pushed through the blinds in thin golden stripes, falling across her untouched eggs, a folded local newspaper, and the black leather handbag resting beside her. Danielle wore a charcoal blazer over a simple cream blouse. Nothing flashy, nothing that should have drawn attention, yet Mercer had been watching her from the moment he walked through the door. He was a broad-shouldered white sheriff in his late 40s, the kind of man who entered a room expecting it to adjust around him. Conversations softened when he passed. People moved their coffee cups aside. Even Maria Alvarez, the diner's owner, straightened behind the counter when she saw him coming. Danielle had noticed all of it. She had also noticed how Mercer never once asked the white traveling salesman 3 stools away why he was in town, or why the couple near the window had plates from another county. His questions belonged only to her. "I'm having breakfast," Danielle finally said, her tone steady. Mercer gave a short smile that carried no warmth. "That's not what I asked." A few customers glanced toward them, then quickly looked away. Danielle could feel the room making a decision without saying a word. Stay out of it. Let the sheriff handle it. Mercer stepped closer to the booth. "That sedan outside yours?" "Yes." "Expensive rental for somebody just passing through." Danielle's fingers remained wrapped around the warm coffee mug. "Is renting a car against county law now?" The sheriff's smile disappeared. "Careful." There it was. Not an answer. A warning. Danielle lowered her eyes for half a second, not because she was afraid, but because she was thinking. Mercer mistook the silence for submission. Men like him often did. "Identification," he said. Danielle reached slowly toward her handbag. Mercer's hand moved toward his belt. "Easy." She stopped. Around them, the diner became so quiet that the soft hiss from the kitchen grill seemed suddenly loud. Danielle looked at him, calm but unreadable. "Sheriff, are you detaining me?" His jaw tightened. "I'm asking the questions. Then I'd like to know what I've done." Mercer glanced around the diner, almost as if the audience gave him confidence. "We've had complaints about strangers asking questions around town. Courthouse schedules. Patrol routes. Who works which shifts?" Danielle's expression did not change, but something behind her eyes sharpened. "Interesting," she said. That single word irritated him more than anger would have. "Stand up." Maria took one cautious step from behind the counter. "Sheriff, she's been sitting there since 7. She hasn't bothered anybody." Mercer did not look at her. "Maria, stay out of police business." Danielle slowly rose from the booth. She was nearly eye level with him now, composed, shoulders relaxed, breathing steady. Mercer seemed disappointed by the absence of fear. "Turn around." Several people stared openly now. Danielle looked toward the window, where the pale morning sun reflected off Mercer's patrol SUV, then briefly toward the phone lying face down beside her plate. A tiny red light glowed beneath its case, unnoticed by everyone except her. She turned around. Mercer placed the handcuffs around her wrists without ceremony. The metallic click seemed impossibly loud in the diner. Someone whispered, "What did she do?" No one answered. Danielle closed her eyes for one brief second. The humiliation was real. So was the anger. But she gave Mercer neither. No shouting. No struggle. No desperate explanation. When she turned back toward him, her voice was low enough that the entire room had to lean into the silence to hear it. "Sheriff Mercer, you should be very certain about what you're doing." He laughed under his breath. "Trust me, I am." Danielle studied his face as if committing it to memory. What Mercer did not know was that she had heard those same words before, in recorded interviews, sealed complaints, and statements from people who claimed they had been stopped, searched, threatened, and dismissed inside this county for years. He thought he had just found a suspicious stranger at breakfast. Danielle knew something he didn't. This morning had never been about breakfast. For a moment, nobody moved. The handcuffs around Danielle Brooks's wrists had changed the temperature of the room, but Sheriff Wade Mercer seemed to enjoy the silence. He stood beside her booth with the confidence of a man who believed that wearing a badge meant never having to explain himself. "You people always make things harder than they need to be," he said quietly. Danielle looked at him without reacting. Maria Alvarez heard the words from behind the counter and lowered the coffee pot in her hand. A few customers shifted uneasily in their seats. Mercer reached toward Danielle's handbag. "I'm going to take a look inside." Danielle's voice remained calm. "Do you have a warrant?" Mercer gave her a thin smile. "You are being detained during an active investigation. That gives me enough." Danielle said nothing. She simply watched him. It was not the silence of someone defeated. It was the silence of someone collecting information. Mercer opened the bag and began removing items onto the table. A wallet, a charging cable, a small notebook, a pair of reading glasses. Nothing unusual, nothing illegal. His irritation grew with every ordinary object. Then he found a folded county map marked with several circles in blue ink. His expression changed. "Well, look at this." He held it up for the room to see. "You want to explain why a woman supposedly here for breakfast has the sheriff's office, courthouse, evidence building, and 3 patrol zones marked on a map?" Danielle glanced at it. "I would rather hear what you think it means." Mercer stared at her, clearly surprised by the answer. "I think it means I was right to stop you." "That is not what I asked." His face tightened. Across the room, Deputy Ethan Cole had just stepped through the front door. He had come to pick up coffee before his morning shift, but the scene stopped him halfway inside. "Sheriff." Mercer turned. "Good. Come over here." Ethan approached slowly. He was younger, early 30s, clean uniform, cautious eyes. He looked at Danielle, then at the handcuffs, then at the items spread across the table. "What happened?" "Suspicious activity," Mercer said. "She has been asking questions around town and mapping department locations." Ethan looked at the map. "Did someone file a complaint?" Mercer did not answer immediately. Danielle noticed that. So did Ethan. "We are handling it," Mercer finally said. "Take her phone." Ethan hesitated. Danielle's phone still rested face down beside the plate. The tiny recording light was hidden from his angle. "Sheriff, should we not document the detention first?" Mercer turned slowly toward him. "Are you questioning me in front of civilians?" Ethan's jaw tightened. "No, sir." "Then take the phone." Danielle watched Ethan reach for it. But before his fingers touched the case, she spoke. "Deputy Cole." Ethan froze. Mercer looked at her sharply. "How do you know his name?" Danielle nodded toward Ethan's uniform. "It is on his badge." Mercer gave a short laugh, but Danielle continued. "Deputy, before you touch that device, you might want to ask your sheriff why the evidence room inventory from March 12th does not match the property logs from March 18th. The diner went completely still. Ethan looked at Mercer. Mercer no longer looked amused. "What did you just say?" Danielle met his eyes. "I asked a simple question." Mercer stepped closer. "Where did you get those dates?" Danielle's expression remained unreadable. "Maybe the better question is why they matter to you." Maria stopped breathing for a second. Ethan looked from Danielle to Mercer, and something in his face changed. He had seen those dates before. 2 months earlier, he had noticed missing signatures on confiscated cash records, but Mercer had told him it was a clerical problem. Now a stranger in handcuffs was naming the exact files. Mercer reached for the map and folded it quickly. "We are taking her in." Danielle lowered her eyes toward the cold coffee on the table, then back to him. "Of course you are." Her calm unsettled him more than resistance ever could. Outside, somewhere beyond the diner windows, a dark sport utility vehicle turned onto Route 27 and slowed as it approached the parking lot. The dark sport utility vehicle rolled past the diner without stopping, slow enough for Danielle Brooks to notice its reflection in the glass, then continued toward the county courthouse 3 blocks away. Sheriff Wade Mercer did not see it. His attention was fixed on controlling the room. "Deputy Cole, bring the car around," he said. Ethan hesitated. "Sheriff, we still do not have a clear charge." Mercer turned toward him with a look that silenced the question before it could become an argument. "Interfering with an investigation. Suspicious conduct. We will sort it out at the office." Ethan glanced at Danielle. She stood beside the booth with her hands secured behind her, her breakfast untouched, her expression composed in a way that now felt less like patience and more like calculation. Maria Alvarez stepped closer to the counter. "She paid for her meal. She has been polite every morning she has come in." Mercer looked at her. "Every morning?" Maria realized too late that the words mattered. Danielle saw the realization cross Mercer's face. "How many mornings?" he asked. Maria swallowed. "Maybe 5. 6. Mercer turned back toward Danielle. "So you have been watching this town." Danielle answered quietly. I have been paying attention. That distinction hung in the air. Mercer moved closer. To what? Danielle let several seconds pass. Patterns. Ethan looked at her again. Mercer scoffed, but there was less confidence in it now. You think that sounds clever? No, Danielle said. I think it sounds accurate. Mercer reached for the notebook he had removed from her bag. He flipped through the pages, expecting names or plans, but found only ordinary observations written in neat handwriting. Times, vehicle numbers, dates, initials. Then he stopped. One page contained a list of traffic stops from the previous month. Another showed property receipt numbers. A third contained 3 names Ethan recognized from internal reports that had never been released publicly. Ethan stepped closer. Where did you get those? Mercer snapped the notebook shut. That is enough. Danielle looked directly at Ethan. Ask him. Mercer turned. Ask me what? Why report number 4817 was amended 2 days after Deputy Cole signed it. Ethan's face changed. He remembered the report. A roadside seizure. Cash logged on a Monday, corrected on Wednesday, then quietly closed. Mercer had told him the discrepancy was routine. Sheriff, Ethan said carefully. How does she know that number? Mercer ignored him and faced Danielle. You are trying to intimidate my deputy. Danielle almost smiled, but did not. I have not raised my voice once. The truth of it made the room even quieter. Mercer had controlled the volume. Danielle had controlled everything else. Maria watched from behind the counter, sensing that the woman she had served coffee all week was not simply passing through town. Danielle had asked ordinary questions, but always the right ones. Which deputies worked nights? Why some families avoided certain roads? Why people lowered their voices when the sheriff entered? Maria had assumed curiosity. Now she understood it had been something else. Mercer leaned closer to Danielle. Who sent you here? You are asking better questions now. His jaw tightened. Ethan looked toward the diner windows. Across the street, a second dark vehicle had appeared near the pharmacy lot. It parked facing the diner, engine running. Sheriff, Ethan said quietly. We might want to slow this down. Mercer followed his gaze. For the first time that morning, uncertainty entered his face. Danielle saw it and said nothing. That silence was different now. It was not endurance. It was timing. Mercer turned back toward her. What exactly are you waiting for? Danielle held his stare. For you to finish making your choices. For several seconds, Sheriff Wade Mercer said nothing. The question had unsettled him because Danielle Brooks did not sound like someone hoping to escape trouble. She sounded like someone measuring it. Ethan Cole noticed the change first. Mercer's shoulders were still squared. His voice still carried authority, but the certainty had begun to thin. Outside, the dark vehicle across the street remained parked with its engine running. A second cup of coffee cooled untouched near the register. Somewhere in the kitchen, a timer chimed, and no one moved to silence it. Mercer picked up Danielle's notebook again. You have been collecting information about my department. Danielle met his eyes. I have been documenting public records, speaking with residents, and observing what happens in public places. Mercer gave a humorless smile. That sounds like surveillance. That depends on what you are afraid someone might see. Ethan looked down. Maria covered her reaction by reaching for a towel. Mercer's face hardened. You think you can come into my county and make accusations? Danielle answered. I have not accused you of anything. You keep quoting report numbers. Because they exist. You keep asking about evidence logs. Because they changed. You keep watching my deputies. Because patterns matter. Each answer was quiet. Each one landed harder than the last. Mercer glanced toward the customers, perhaps realizing that every person in the diner was listening now. He lowered his voice. You are going to tell me who you work for? Danielle did not answer. Local newspaper? Silence. Private investigator? Nothing. Attorney? Danielle looked toward the window. The vehicle across the street switched off its headlights. That was all. No dramatic entrance. No sirens. Just one small change that only she seemed to understand. Ethan saw it too. Sheriff, he said carefully. Maybe we should call county council before we move her. Mercer turned on him. Since when do you need a lawyer to do your job? Since a detained woman started citing internal file numbers that I remember signing. That sentence changed the room. Mercer stared at Ethan. Be careful. Ethan swallowed, but this time he did not look away. I am being careful. Danielle's gaze shifted between them. She had spent 6 mornings in this diner learning who spoke, who stayed silent, who feared Mercer, and who still possessed enough conscience to hesitate. Ethan had always been the uncertain one. He had corrected receipts, asked questions, left paper trails Mercer assumed no one would ever connect. Danielle had not approached him because she needed to know whether he would protect the system or the truth when forced to choose. This morning was answering that question for her. Mercer reached for Danielle's phone. "I am taking this into evidence." "On what basis?" she asked. "Possible connection to an ongoing investigation." "Which investigation?" Mercer paused. Danielle continued before he could invent one. "The theft complaint from the diner that does not exist? The suspicious vehicle report nobody filed? Or the patrol concern you mentioned without a case number?" Maria looked sharply at Mercer. Ethan's expression tightened. The sheriff's silence now belonged to him. Danielle lowered her voice. "This is why details matter." Mercer placed the phone on the table without taking it. For the first time, his hand was cautious. Then a car door closed outside. Another followed. Ethan looked through the window and saw two people in business clothes stepping from the dark vehicle. Neither hurried. Neither looked confused. They walked toward the diner with the calm purpose of people who already knew exactly where they were going. Mercer followed Ethan's stare. "Friends of yours?" he asked. Danielle looked at the front door as the bell above it began to move. "Not friends," she said. "Witnesses." The bell above the diner door gave a soft chime as the two strangers entered, and Sheriff Wade Mercer immediately straightened. The first was a tall man in a navy suit carrying a slim leather folder. Beside him walked a woman in a gray coat with a calm, observant expression. Neither displayed a badge. Neither introduced themselves. That seemed to bother Mercer more than if they had. "Can I help you?" he asked. The man glanced at Danielle, then at the handcuffs, and finally at Mercer. "We are here for breakfast." The answer was so ordinary that several customers looked confused. Mercer did not. His eyes narrowed. "This is an active law enforcement matter." The woman in the gray coat nodded toward an empty booth. "Then we will stay out of your way." They sat down without another word. Maria hesitated before approaching them with menus, but Danielle caught her eye and gave the smallest nod. "Keep going. Keep everything normal." Mercer noticed the exchange. "You know them?" he asked Danielle. "You asked if they were friends. I answered you. That was not my question." "Then ask a better one." Ethan Cole looked away, hiding the beginning of a reaction. Mercer turned toward him sharply. "Deputy, get the cruiser ready." Ethan did not move. "Sir, before we transport her, I want the detention basis written down." Mercer stared at him. "You want paperwork now?" "Yes, sir." The answer was respectful, but firm. Something had changed in Ethan during the last 10 minutes. He was no longer trying to avoid conflict. He was trying to avoid becoming part of it. Mercer seemed to understand that. "Fine," he said. "Suspicious activity related to departmental security." Danielle tilted her head slightly. "Departmental security?" Mercer ignored her and continued. "Possible unauthorized collection of operational information." The man in the navy suit opened his menu as if deeply interested in pancakes. The woman beside him quietly placed her phone on the table. Mercer saw that too. "No recording," he said. She looked up. "I have not said I am recording." "Then put the phone away." "Is that a lawful order?" Mercer's face tightened again. Danielle watched the exchange in silence. This was becoming more useful than she had expected. Every unnecessary command, every invented justification, every attempt to control witnesses. Mercer believed authority was strongest when no one questioned it. He did not understand that authority looked very different once every question was preserved. Maria returned behind the counter and pulled a small order pad from her apron. Her hands trembled slightly as she wrote the time at the top of the page. 7:42 in the morning. Danielle noticed. So did the woman in gray. Mercer reached for Danielle's notebook again. "I want an answer. Why were you tracking traffic stops?" Danielle looked at him. "Because some of them followed the same pattern." "What pattern?" "Out-of-county drivers. Mostly black motorists. Similar reasons for the stops. Similar searches. Similar missing property complaints afterward." The room changed. A man sitting near the window slowly lowered his coffee. An older woman at the counter turned in her seat. Mercer's expression hardened. "That is a serious accusation." "It would be," Danielle said, "if I had called it an accusation." Ethan's eyes moved to the closed notebook in Mercer's hand. Danielle continued. "But patterns are not accusations. Records are not accusations. Dates are not accusations. They are facts waiting to be compared." Mercer gave a cold laugh. You think a notebook makes you an investigator? Danielle held his gaze. No. She paused. Training does. The woman in gray looked down at her coffee to hide a smile. Mercer did not notice. Ethan did. For the first time, he understood that the question was no longer whether Danielle belonged in this investigation. The question was how long she had been leading it. Mercer's eyes stayed on Danielle, but the confidence behind them had started to fracture. Training for what? He asked. Danielle did not answer immediately. She looked instead at Ethan Cole, then at Maria Alvarez, then toward the two quiet strangers seated near the front window. Every person in the diner had become part of the record now, whether Mercer understood that or not. You keep asking who I am, Danielle said. You should be asking why so many people in this county are afraid to file complaints against your office. Mercer gave a short laugh, but no one joined him. People complain about law enforcement every day. That does not make the complaints true. No, Danielle said. Evidence does. The woman in the gray coat lifted her coffee but did not drink. Ethan watched Mercer closely. Danielle continued, her voice level. 6 weeks ago, a delivery driver named Marcus Reed was stopped on County Road 14. The report said he consented to a search. His statement says he did not. $380 was listed as seized property, but the evidence ledger shows $280. Ethan's face tightened. Mercer said nothing. 4 days later, Danielle continued. A nursing assistant named Tasha Green was stopped after leaving an overnight shift. Her vehicle was held for almost 2 hours. No citation was issued. Her complaint disappeared from the public log within 48 hours. Mercer's eyes flicked toward Ethan. Where are you getting this? Danielle ignored the question. Then there was James Holloway. Retired teacher. 68 years old. Same road. Same explanation. Same missing paperwork. The diner had gone so quiet that the ticking clock above the pie display could be heard between her sentences. Mercer looked around as if searching for the authority he had walked in with. You expect me to believe you just happened to collect all this? No, Danielle said. I expect you to understand that none of it happened by accident. Ethan slowly exhaled. He remembered Reed. He remembered Green. He remembered seeing Holloway's name on a complaint sheet that vanished from the filing cabinet the next morning. He had convinced himself there was an explanation because believing otherwise meant admitting something was deeply wrong. Sheriff, Ethan said, I need to ask you something. Mercer turned toward him. Not now. Why did you tell me the Holloway complaint was withdrawn? Mercer's expression sharpened. Because it was. Ethan shook his head. I saw his signature. He wanted it investigated. A murmur moved through the diner. Mercer lowered his voice. You are confused. No, sir. I am not. Danielle watched Ethan carefully. This was the moment she had been waiting for, not because she needed him to accuse Mercer, but because she needed him to decide whether truth mattered more than loyalty. Mercer pointed toward the door. Go outside. Now. Ethan stayed where he was. I would rather remain as a witness. Mercer stared at him. Danielle's calm expression did not change, but inside, another piece had fallen into place. Mercer turned back to her. You planned this. I documented it. You came here hoping I would make a mistake. Danielle shook her head. I came here hoping you would not. That answer landed harder than anything else she had said. Mercer glanced toward the two strangers. The man in the navy suit finally closed his menu. The woman beside him checked the time. 7:48 in the morning. Danielle looked at Mercer and lowered her voice. 6 minutes ago, you had a chance to slow down. 5 minutes ago, you had a chance to explain. 4 minutes ago, you had a chance to correct the record. You chose something else every time. Mercer's face went still. Outside, another dark vehicle turned into the parking lot. This one did not continue past. It stopped directly in front of the diner. The vehicle outside settled into silence, and for the first time that morning, Sheriff Wade Mercer did not immediately speak. The diner windows reflected 3 figures stepping onto the sidewalk, all dressed in plain business clothes, all moving with the calm precision of people who had no need to announce themselves. Ethan Cole looked toward Danielle. She did not move. You knew they were coming, he said quietly. Danielle answered without taking her eyes off Mercer. I knew someone would come when the time was right. Mercer scoffed, but the sound lacked conviction. This little performance is over. He reached for Danielle's notebook again, but the man in the navy suit near the window finally stood. Sheriff, I would leave that where it is. Mercer turned sharply. And who exactly are you? The man removed a leather identification case from inside his jacket and held it open. Special Agent Thomas Reed, Federal Bureau of Investigation. The room seemed to contract around those words. Maria stopped beside the coffee station. Ethan stared at the credentials, then at Danielle. The woman in the gray coat stood next. Special Agent Karen Mills. Mercer looked from one badge to the other, his face searching for some explanation that would return the room to him. Then the front door opened. The three people from outside entered quietly. One of them, a silver-haired man carrying a federal case folder, walked directly toward Danielle. "Agent Brooks," he said. That was the moment everything changed. Not because he raised his voice. Not because anyone rushed forward. Because he called her Agent Brooks. Ethan's eyes widened. Maria brought one hand slowly to her mouth. Mercer remained completely still. Danielle looked at him. "Sheriff, you asked me who I work for." The silver-haired man reached Danielle and identified himself as Supervisory Special Agent Robert Hayes. He then turned toward Mercer. "Please remove the handcuffs from Special Agent Brooks." Mercer blinked. "She is under investigation." Hayes's expression remained neutral. "No, she is conducting one." Silence. Heavy, complete silence. Mercer looked at Danielle as though seeing her for the first time. The quiet woman at the breakfast table. The map. The notebook. The dates. The questions. The mornings spent listening while he walked through town, believing no one important was watching. His voice came out lower now. "You are Federal Bureau of Investigation?" Danielle nodded once. "Undercover assignment. Public corruption and civil rights review." Ethan slowly closed his eyes for a second. Every strange detail suddenly made sense. Mercer looked toward the agents surrounding the diner, then back at Danielle. "This is entrapment." Danielle's answer was immediate. "No one asked you to detain me." Mercer said nothing. "No one asked you to invent a complaint." Nothing. "No one asked you to ignore Deputy Cole when he requested documentation." Ethan looked down, then back up. Danielle continued. "And no one asked you to place me in handcuffs while I was eating breakfast." Mercer glanced around the diner. The audience he had enjoyed earlier had become something else now. Witnesses. Maria stepped forward. "I heard everything," she said. Her voice shook, but she kept going. "From the moment you walked in." The older woman at the counter nodded. "So did I." A man near the window raised his hand slightly. "Me too." Mercer looked toward Ethan as though expecting loyalty. Ethan met his eyes. "My body camera has been running since I entered." That sentence seemed to drain the last color from Mercer's expression. Hayes addressed him calmly. "Sheriff Mercer, this is now a federal evidence preservation scene. Do not remove, alter, delete, or direct anyone to change any record connected to today's detention or the cases Agent Brooks referenced." Mercer swallowed. "Am I under arrest?" Hayes answered. "At this moment, you are being instructed to preserve evidence and cooperate with an active federal investigation." Danielle turned slightly so Mercer could access the handcuff key. His hands hesitated before he removed them. When the cuffs opened, Danielle slowly brought her hands forward. She rubbed one wrist once, then reached for the phone beside her breakfast plate. The tiny recording light was still glowing. Mercer stared at it. Danielle picked it up and stopped the recording. 7:52 in the morning, she said. "The final piece arrived exactly where we thought it might." Mercer frowned. "Final piece of what?" Danielle looked toward the notebook, then toward Ethan, Maria, and the federal agents now filling the diner. A pattern that finally stopped being invisible. For several seconds, no one spoke after Danielle Brooks finished the sentence. The silence was no longer awkward. It was evidentiary. Every face in Miller's diner seemed to understand that something larger than one bad morning had just surfaced in front of them. Supervisory Special Agent Robert Hayes opened the federal case folder and placed 3 sealed document packets on the table beside Danielle's untouched breakfast. "Sheriff Mercer," he said, "these orders authorize preservation and collection of departmental records connected to the investigation Agent Brooks has been conducting." Mercer stared at the papers without reaching for them. "You came prepared." Danielle answered before Hayes could. "We came prepared because people in this county had already tried to speak." Mercer looked at her. "You think this is all about me?" "No," Danielle said. "That is exactly the problem." Ethan Cole shifted his weight. Maria Alvarez stood behind the counter, listening closely. Danielle opened her notebook and turned to a page Mercer had not seen. "The issue is not one traffic stop. It is not one missing receipt. It is not one complaint that disappeared. It is what happens when the same choices repeat often enough that they stop looking accidental. Hayes nodded towards Special Agent Karen Mills, who placed another folder on the table. Inside were copies of vehicle stop records, property logs, complaint timestamps, and internal correction forms. Mercer's eyes moved across the pages. His expression changed as he recognized dates, initials, and signatures. Those are internal documents. Some are, Danielle said. Some came from public records. Some came from people who kept copies when they stopped trusting your office to keep them. Ethan looked toward her. And the rest? Danielle turned to him. The rest came from people inside the department who were not comfortable with what they were seeing. Mercer immediately looked at Ethan. You? Ethan shook his head. Not me. Danielle closed the folder. This investigation was underway before I ever met Deputy Cole. Mercer seemed almost relieved for half a second, until Danielle continued. But what happened here this morning gave us something the paperwork could not. What exactly? Mercer asked. Danielle looked around the diner. Context. Hayes stepped in. A pattern in records can be challenged as clerical error. A complaint can be dismissed as misunderstanding. But behavior observed in real time, documented by independent witnesses, recorded from multiple sources, and connected to prior allegations becomes harder to explain away. Mercer glanced toward Ethan's body camera, Danielle's phone, Maria's handwritten notes, and the two agents who had been seated quietly through the encounter. Every object in the room now seemed to carry weight. You set me up, he said. Danielle's expression remained composed. I sat down for breakfast. You knew I would come in. I knew you usually did. You knew I would question you. Danielle paused. I knew there was a possibility. And the handcuffs? Mercer asked. Did you expect that too? For the first time, something sad entered Danielle's face. I hoped I was wrong. That answer silenced him. Hayes turned toward Ethan. Deputy Cole, your cooperation will be documented. We are going to need access to incident reports, property intake records, archive complaints, and any communications regarding amendments to those files. Ethan nodded slowly. I will cooperate. Mercer looked at him as if the words were betrayal. Ethan met his gaze. Sir, I joined this department because I believe the badge was supposed to mean accountability too. Mercer looked away. Outside, federal personnel moved quietly toward the courthouse and sheriff's office, carrying evidence containers and document bags. No spectacle, no shouting, just procedure. Danielle finally sat back down. Maria approached and looked at the cold plate in front of her. Do you want me to warm that up? Danielle glanced at the eggs, then at the sheriff standing a few feet away. Yes, please. Maria gave a small nod and carried the plate toward the kitchen. Mercer watched her go, then looked at Danielle again. That is it. After all this, you are going back to breakfast. Danielle picked up her coffee cup. It had gone cold too. No, Sheriff. After all this, the investigation is going forward. Breakfast is just breakfast. 3 weeks later, Miller's Diner sounded like itself again. Plates touched tabletops, coffee poured steadily, and morning conversations returned without anyone lowering their voice when the front door opened. Danielle Brooks sat at the same corner booth near the window, but this time there was no notebook beside her plate and no reason to watch the parking lot. Maria Alvarez brought over fresh coffee and set it down with a smile. On the house. Danielle shook her head. You know I cannot let you do that. Maria laughed softly. Then leave a good tip. Across town, the sheriff's office had changed almost overnight. Federal investigators had collected records going back several years. Independent auditors compared property logs with bank deposits. Civil rights attorneys reviewed traffic stops and complaints. Several cases that had once been dismissed as paperwork errors were reopened. What happened next was not dramatic in the way rumors had predicted. There were no shouting matches in the courthouse hallway and no grand public spectacle. There were hearings, interviews, signed statements, and long days of people answering questions they had avoided for years. Wade Mercer was placed on administrative leave while the investigation continued. Then the county commission accepted his resignation after federal findings confirmed repeated failures in complaint handling, evidence procedures, and discriminatory enforcement practices. His badge did not disappear because Danielle demanded revenge. It disappeared because the record finally became impossible to ignore. Ethan Cole stayed with the department. At first, some people called him disloyal. Others avoided him. But he kept showing up. He testified about altered files, helped investigators locate archived records, and later joined a county reform committee responsible for new evidence controls and complaint reviews. One morning, he walked into the diner wearing his uniform and stopped beside Danielle's booth. "I should have spoken sooner," he said. Danielle looked at him for a moment. "Then speak sooner next time." Ethan nodded. There was no absolution in her voice, but there was room for responsibility. That mattered more. Maria poured him coffee and pointed toward an empty seat. "Sit down before it gets cold." Ethan did. Outside, traffic moved along Route 27 under a clear Georgia sky. The town looked unchanged, but people behaved differently now. Residents who once whispered about bad stops began filing formal complaints. Deputies were required to document searches more carefully. Property records were reviewed by more than one person. None of it was perfect. Danielle knew better than anyone that systems did not heal because one powerful man fell. They changed when ordinary people stopped treating silence as safety. She looked through the window at the courthouse 3 blocks away and remembered the morning Mercer had stood over her believing he controlled every question, every answer, every person in the room. He had seen a quiet black woman sitting alone and decided that quiet meant powerless. He had mistaken patience for fear, restraint for weakness, and authority for immunity. Danielle finished her coffee and left cash beneath the cup. As she stood, Maria asked, "Are you leaving town?" Danielle slipped on her coat. "For now." "Another assignment?" Danielle smiled faintly. "Something like that." She walked toward the door, then stopped when Maria called her name. "Danielle." She turned. Maria's expression had grown serious. "Thank you for believing us." Danielle looked around the diner at the people who had finally chosen to become witnesses instead of spectators. "You gave me something to believe." Then she stepped outside into the morning light. Behind her, the bell above the door rang once and settled. Wade Mercer had believed the badge made his words stronger than everyone else's truth. In the end, the badge did not protect him from the truth. It simply showed everyone how much truth he had tried to hide.